Well, as Matt was pointing out, the Alberta Health Services again under scrutiny for some of the spending and contract allegations that they've gone through. We're going to have that discussion with an MLA. First, though, here's Danielle Smith commenting on it yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, here's the bottom line. An AHS executive VP was restructured out of her AHS executive position, handed almost $1 million pension package, and hired back the very next day on a sole source consulting contract worth $250,000. Mr. Speaker, this entire sordid example is precisely what is wrong with Alberta Health Services.
Opposition Leader Danielle Smith talking about that. And of course, we have Drew Barnes, Wild Rose infrastructure critic, MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, to discuss this. And another example, Drew, of what happened. But let's go through the abuse in this particular case because we're looking at a huge contract awarded the day after somebody retires from AHS.
Yeah, it seems unbelievable that the day after somebody retires with approximately $850,000 in supplementary pension benefits, that they would be given a sole source contract for another $250,000. It seems illogical. And Pat, when we put this in the bigger context, many Albertans are telling me, many people from Cypress Medicine Hat are telling me, in a year that we have a $5.5 billion deficit, with healthcare increasing to $18.3 billion a year, that's approximately 45% of our provincial budget. People are absolutely amazed at the money that's not going to frontline workers.
Yeah, no question about it. Just focusing on this contract, when you say it's a sole source, was it tendered?
My information is that it wasn't. We're checking into that. We're finding many instances where this government in general is providing a lot of sole source contracts where we're not putting things out to get the best competitive bid that we can. Pat, again, what's surprising in this case is Alberta Health Services has its own communications department. There's 19 people that could have handled this, 100,000 employees already. It's hard to imagine that this couldn't have been handled in a more cost-efficient way.
Yeah, I look for the business case in all of these things, and I'm looking for exactly what you just described, whether cheaper ways or better ways to do this thing. $252,000 for coaching, mentoring, change management, and transition support. Talk to me about transition support. What is it about AHS that required a huge transition support?
Well, it seems like they change things continually on whims. They went to centralization 6 or 7 years ago, which has been a huge failure in terms of increasing our waiting lines. A huge failure as the costs, go up tremendously each year. The transition from their 87 vice presidents, they changed the names of many of their job descriptions a short time ago. It seems like there's a lot of reshuffling of the deck chairs on the Titanic here instead of actually making significant changes that will give Albertans better services and frontline workers better support.
You know, it's interesting, Drew, as I went through this story, I also saw that there was a different contract for $348,000 in coaching fees as well, and executive fees as well. Do we know if the $250,000 is included in that $350,000, or is it really $600,000 total?
We are not sure at this point, Pat. It's a good question. We are checking into that. We're noticing that there's been a lot of image surveys as well, even some fine arts consultation that this money has gone to. I understand on Twitter the BC General Surgeons last night were questioning where this money could go to. So they're wondering the value of it. But again, at a time that for many of our more elective surgeries, waiting lists are 2 and 3 years, this is money that could be way better spent on nurses, on hips and knees replacement, insulin pumps. There's many, many areas that this money could be better spent to help all Albertans.
Yeah, and I wonder, and we do have to take a commercial break, Drew, but I'll be right back because I want to come back and discuss whether you think this might be happening in other departments. Is there a sense of entitlement across the board? We'll be right back.
We've got lung cancer patients waiting twice as long for treatment as everyone else in Canada. We've got dialysis patients who can't get service in their cities and towns. There isn't enough money for these priorities, but there always seems to be enough money for well-connected health consultants. Albertans are tired of seeing their precious health care dollars flushed away. AHS is a disaster, and something must be done.
Again, that's Opposition Leader Danielle Smith talking about the AHS situation, where we find out $250 million has been spent in hiring outside consultants, and then the most egregious or most recent one being $250,000, a contract being awarded a day after somebody was left the AHS. So, excuse me. So Drew Barnes is discussing that with us. You know, Drew, when we look at this, and I do want to drive on to the abuses, but $250 million within a huge budget, does it go unnoticed by people like the Auditor General?
Well, no, it doesn't. You know, the Auditor General, though, he does a very good job of highlighting where taxpayers' money is not spent efficiently and effectively. The problem we can't lose sight here, though, is it's the PC government that sets the road. They set the map as to where this money's spent, and they put out what they're trying to achieve from it, and then the Auditor General steps in from there. So what's really important here is this whole direction, this huge spending, this huge desire to hire $250 million in outside consultants is set by our PC government, and the effectiveness of it is up to us and the Auditor General to look at. And obviously the proof is in the pudding. When we're seeing 3-year waiting lists, when we're seeing many Albertans in the province for elective surgeries, where that expertise and that money goes out of our province, obviously the system is not functioning as well as it should be.
No question about it. But this is the Alberta Health Services, and as we've been talking about, there's been a transition there. We also know that, for instance, the teachers' unions stepped up and supported the PCs in the last election. Where do we stand as far as education and some of the other big spending programs in Alberta are concerned?
Well, education, of course, is a big spending program. It's been under a little bit of a look at by the opposition party, as we've talked a bit about some of the changes with the math curriculum and those kind of things. You know, there's some concern there. The one that I'm most familiar with, though, is infrastructure, and we look at a couple real good examples there of sole source contracts. We look at the federal building. Our PC government has taken $375 million to renovate approximately office space for 600 people. $375 million, that's a regional hospital. That's somewhere around 15 schools that could have been built instead. And of course, we've all heard the controversy about the Sky Palace, where somewhere between $1 to $2 million, the PCs were going to put in a premier or a VIP executive suite with a PC MLA alumni lounge. Just incredible things that don't make sense at a time where we have a $5.5 billion deficit and on track to be $20 billion in the hole just 2 years from now. If I can go on, another good example of this, Pat, is when they bundled 19 schools into the P3 alternative that they like to use, an alternative that is just going to add considerable debt to our bottom line that our kids and our grandkids are going to have to pay off. They only received one bidder on this package of 19 schools in regard to their request for proposal. If they go forward with that, there's no way possible that Albertans will be getting the best deal for their tax dollars.
Yeah, but I mean, if I'm a corporation out there in a non-competitive environment, why would I even bid? I mean, you set your table, don't you, a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely you do. My understanding is that the losing bids can even be paid out in these instances. And, you know, it seems to me that too often that these contracts are not put out where we could break them up and use local builders in Medicine Hat and Lethbridge and Calgary throughout the whole province to build one or two of these schools for us so the taxpayer could get more value. And that, of course, is the bottom line. Yeah,
and it comes back into the local economy as well. Drew, great to have that discussion. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you for your time.